Hey guys, want to welcome you again to the Three Circle Podcast, Beyond the Weekend. This is the place where we take the weekend teaching a little bit further. We go deeper, we dig in, and I'm the lead pastor here at Three Circle, Chris Bell, and I also, as always, will have a special guest today. And every week it's been awesome because not only do we go beyond the weekend, but we get to know people, and everyone has a story. That's what we're learning. And so we're all on this journey, and we hope that while you're on yours, whether you're in a car or on a back porch, maybe you're at a beach, a lake, enjoying your summer, we hope that today, somehow, this Beyond the Weekend podcast will stir your affection for Christ, encourage you, maybe make you laugh, hopefully make you think a little bit. And I think that's going to happen today because on the podcast, we have one of my good buds. He's a major part of the Three Circle team. Came to us years ago from Amarillo, Texas, but this is really his home, this region, the Gulf Coast, South Alabama. He is the technical director of Three Circle across all of our campuses. He is kind of running one of the most important parts of what we do, but he does not see this just as technical directing. He sees it as ministry. You're going to hear some about that today. He's a great dad. He's a lover of great music, great coffee, and also he actually is an opera-trained singer. We're going to get into that too. The ever-interesting Adam Ingersoll.
How you doing?
Oh, you know, what's weird is you seem to enjoy every part of that introduction until I got to that opera part.
Yeah, that's the part of my past that I kind of want to bury into the ground, you know?
Yeah, and you know we just won't allow that.
I know.
Now I hear that recently. Now you've got an awesome wife and a beautiful family. I'm sure we'll tap into that a little bit too. But your wife kind of went behind you a little bit, right? The story is
she did.
And what did she give to some of your partners here at Three Circle?
She gave a video of my senior recital in college, and
which was opera.
Which was opera, or just classical music, not necessarily opera, but
opera sounds better.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So we have that.
A little embarrassing. No, we don't.
Oh,
we shouldn't. Somebody should not have it anymore, but he probably does.
I want to see it, Adam. I want to see it. Okay. So, Adam, good to have you on the podcast, man. And I'm always I guess I want people out there that see what happens at Three Circle. I wish they could see all that's behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And you're one of those guys, and you have a team. There's a team of people that are doing so much that people literally don't understand, just the hours and the expertise. You know, when you can, I still remember you interviewing and just what you were going to bring to the table, and you were going to be able to take us further and help us be excellent. Could you just kind of tell the listeners a little bit about what you do? What does it mean to be a technical director of a church of this many campuses and doing the kind of stuff we do?
So my job as technical director is to take the content that's created and implement it. So everything you see on the screens, our creative director and his oversight gives, the look of our church.
Right. And that's Jeremy Stevens.
That's Jeremy Stevens.
And the two of you really work in tandem a lot, right?
Yeah. So everything that he creates, we talk about like how we can make it and put it out there for the public to see.
Okay.
And so on the weekends, whenever you see backgrounds, lyrics, videos, anything that we have created here, it's our job as technical people to get that through our system and be visible.
So what's your background that kind of, what did training look like? How did you get prepared? I know you've done a lot of different things. And again, you were doing the same stuff in Amarillo. You did it at other churches. But how did you prepare yourself for a kind of a career like this?
So I've always been interested in music. I always, played instruments and sang and everything. But in high school was whenever I started kind of loving the technology side of things. Not for technology's sake, but for the whole of the service, you have the teaching, you have worship, you have all the stuff, but you need something that kind of brings all that together and makes that full package,
right?
Experience for the weekend. And so I started, running sound when I was 16, figuring out how to run lights. Back when it was just a couple faders, you push up a light that turns on and turns off, and then you can put a gel in there, change colors, all that stuff. Technology is so much different now.
Everyone has that starting point, right?
Yeah.
It seems like, because you're so advanced now, you truly are a lead at what you do. But it all started just trying to figure it out, right? With some sliders and some jets. I haven't heard that term in a long time.
I know, man.
Just change a gel, you know, and
absolutely.
we used to do that stuff all the time. And then, of course, the digital world has changed so much of that. In some ways, you could say, I guess, it made it easier, but you would probably also say more
Different.
complex too,
Yeah, it's
right?
different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So mostly self-taught up until college, and I actually went to college for music business,
Okay. Where'd you go?
South Alabama.
All right.
And so in that music business degree, it was actually music business and technology. And so it was like recording technologies and things like that. So, but the way South Alabama programs is that you have to have an instrument to play or sing or whatever. And so that's why I just chose to sing, because it's like, I'm not a good enough pianist to do all this classical stuff,
Right.
Hardly play guitar. I can
So
play chords.
you thought singing may be, I hate to say easier route, but maybe.
Yeah. I mean, more natural, I guess.
Did that end up being the case? Do you think?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I mean, by no means was I anywhere near the best in my class, kind of thing. There's definitely that other level of person. There's a guy that was with us that is now like internationally renowned. He's traveling all over the world.
Wow.
And, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay, so you trained, and to me that gives you a toolbox, if you will,
Yeah.
for what you do now, because you get it. You know what it's like to have a mic in your hand.
Yeah.
You know what it's like to try to project a voice or an instrument, and so all of that is happening here on a given weekend. And then I would assume, Adam, and I'm in on some of the conversations. Of course, you guys are next level with this. Every one of our campuses is like a different situation, right?
Yeah.
That you have to apply all of those tools in a different way. What does that look like when you go to maybe a smaller campus, to a larger, we have basically an outdoor tent thing at the beach that we're trying to figure out. So how does that work?
It's all basically the same.
Okay.
It looks different. It can feel different because of the context you're in, the building you're in.
Right.
But the basics never change.
Okay.
You have to have a certain amount of gain into a microphone for it to work. You can't put too much into it or it peaks. It sounds like garbage.
Right.
But the personnel changes too. And so that's the cool thing about ministry, is that you can look at a bunch of gear and just look at the dials, the knobs, the faders, all that stuff, and say, I just got a person pushing those things this weekend. But they're a person.
Yeah.
And so it's trying to figure out how many different people and different personalities that you're dealing with, and you get to just be, a friend to those people.
Yes.
And from the excellence perspective, when I came here, people felt like they weren't being poured into. And so when someone doesn't feel like they're being poured into, or taught anything, they just they're just there wavering around,
Yeah. Filling
a void
slot.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And so you get to know those people, you hang out with those people, they want to do what they're doing better.
Yeah.
And so that's really it. Like, every campus, like I said, is the same in the sense that everybody has to have technology. Everybody has to have a microphone if you're on stage. But all the basics are the same, and just the people that are different.
It's the people that change.
Yep.
Okay, so that brings me to my next thing about you, which I love. I love this about our whole team, is that you don't, you could easily see what you do as, like you said, really, straight line, pragmatic. We're just going to make it happen, pull it off. But instead, you see it as ministry. You really do. I would love for you to go into the two sides of that. You lead teams of volunteers and people, and you really want to pour into them and develop them as people, not just fill in those slots, but also you see you see technology as a ministry tool.
Yeah.
And you teach that. And so kind of work both sides of that for a moment. How do you invest in people that are actually helping us do this? And then how do you see actually what you do as a part of the tapestry of leading the local church in worship?
So from the people side, is getting to know the person, asking them how their family's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that when they come in, they're prepared because you're prepared. That you give them all the tools they need to be successful, because there's nothing worse than somebody showing up and they're like, how do I do this?
Yeah.
Where's this at? They're chasing their tail because you haven't given them everything they need.
And then they feel like they failed, and really we failed them.
100%.
Yeah.
And so they're going to blame you for that, because it is your fault, if you don't give them everything. And so, it starts there with, giving them the tools that they need and making them feel welcomed, in when they come here. But the technical side of things, I feel that you're not going to be you're not going to reach people at the level that we reach people if they can't hear or see what we're trying to portray to them.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, our sanctuary here is what, 1,200 seats?
Something like that.
You need a mic or you're yelling.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, architecture's not
Of
what
course,
it
the
used to be.
technology, you know, if you go back to like the days of Moses, we know just historically that they had to literally put a physical person they kind of figured out, here's the edge of how far my voice can be heard. And they would put another person there who would literally repeat what that guy said all the way out through the crowd. So really they were doing the best they could with the tools they had. And I kind of feel like that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
We have different tools, and you're constantly kind of staying on the edge of that, right?
Yeah.
To go, hey, here's the best. And of course, anything can get out of hand. So you're really good. I know that's a part of what you do, is going, okay, what do we actually need here to do the very best we can and offer God our best, and therefore offer, you know, the best environment for people to meet him, grow in him, know him, right?
Right.
So that's really huge. So you would see, from speakers to microphones to sound mixes to what's happening on screens, you would see that as a part of, like, the lyrics to a song almost.
Right. I mean, if you listen to a record that is mixed terribly, you're not going to listen to it very long.
That's very true.
You go to a concert that has a bad sound system, you're not going to stay very long.
Man, and we've all had that. I have spent money on great tickets to hear the worst sound before. one of my favorite bands. Hold on, let me get the Revivalist. This incredible band out of New Orleans, and they came to Mobile, and I won't name the place, but I went to hear them. Me and some guys, and these guys are awesome. And it was one of the worst sounding concerts I've ever been to. Like, I could not hear the vocals. I couldn't pick up on anything going on. And I knew how great these guys are. The artistry that was happening on that stage, it wasn't their fault.
Right.
They just had not mixed that room. And I think people don't appreciate what a guy like you and your team does almost until they go experience when it's not good.
Right.
And then they realize, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing and experiencing at our church every weekend is actually incredible.
Yeah.
But that doesn't just happen by accident.
No, it doesn't. There's a lot of work into that. Our audio guy, he is phenomenal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the amount of time it takes for him to do even a podcast is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something about that. We're on this podcast now, doing the podcast. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I've been listening to one recently, and it's a national thing, and it does not sound good. I mean, it's incredible how bad the mix is. Yeah. And I'm thinking, man, so once again, it made me appreciate Paul, who normally does all the mixing here. His work is art, man. It's true artistry and excellence. And I just respect what you guys do so much. And I think if people understood just what it takes to do that, they would. And hopefully this podcast will help maybe inform people that are listening to go, oh, that's happening. And it's really an army of people across all of our campuses that are gifted like you are, and really committed to that excellence. And by the way, just a shout out to the volunteers. You've got great volunteer teams, right?
Yeah, they do. They are wonderful people.
Yeah. And what does a Sunday look like for one of them who just like maybe putting lyrics on a screen?
Yeah, so our computer person runs per presenter. Again, we try to set them up as best we can throughout the week, you know, so that way they're not walking in and what song are we doing this weekend?
And then they got to deal with me with my notes, and I'm sure I can't imagine how you warn them.
It's like, just get ready to hear the guys in the back every once in a while. We got to put that on a shirt.
I know, right? Oh, that's great.
But yeah, so nobody can see who they are. Yeah, you know. So but
they spend hours.
Right.
Like hour after hour after hour. They're there early. They're the last ones leaving the place.
First in, last out is what it is.
Deep commitment, man.
Yep.
Right.
And they love it. You know, they're the type of people that don't want to be seen, which is kind of funny because you have the people that don't want to be seen, but they still want to be thanked.
Of course.
Every once in a while. So it's like,
we all do.
They're anonymous, but, you know.
We all do.
And that's just human nature, I think, you know. It's just,
and instead of getting thanked, they get me on stage going, the guys in the back will.
But everybody looks at Paul.
That's true. Everyone thinks I'm talking about the sound guy. Actually, behind the people, I'm talking about people in what we call the bat cave, which is behind the stage.
Yeah, we keep the lights off in there, so it's dark all the
time. I don't know how I got the name bat cave. Some dumb thing I said years ago, I'm sure, that stuck. But Paul just waves at everyone. He's so nice. He knows that he's not the one that messed up, but he just kind of waves and he takes it like a man, doesn't he?
Yep.
Okay, bro.
Yeah, but setting people up for success. You make sure they have what they need.
Yeah.
You put everything in for them. You teach them the processes of, well, if you click this, this is going there.
Mm-hmm.
You've got checklists for them. If we run MIDI for lyrics on the weekend, so the person who's running ProPresenter doesn't necessarily have to touch the computer in that window of 3 songs. But sometimes MIDI fails.
And when it does,
you got to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I've got a list of hotkeys that if you press any of those buttons, they go to where that verse or chorus starts in the song. So that helps them out a little bit there. Our lighting, it's all programmed for the person when they walk in, and as far as looks go, and then they can come in, and I've got faders and buttons that can do certain things that allow them to move the lights around and kind of feel the music and just put it all together a little bit better.
Right. And I love how, and over the years we've gotten better and better at this under your leadership, but we're not trying to put on a show with lights.
No.
We're not doing a light show.
Not at all.
In fact, we probably only use a fraction of what these things do. Due to your leadership, we're really trying to enhance a worship experience. We're using it to create exactly what people would have done 40 years ago with flags or different things that you would have done. We're trying to create an atmosphere of awe and worship and pointing people to the greatness of God. And we use lights and screens. We use the tools we've been given to do that, right?
Right.
And so, and even Sunday, I know, and I've said it, we kind of do a meeting where we look back over the weekend. One of my favorite moments was my interaction with the person in the back and what we call the back cave back there running the screen. And I had this illustration that had multiple photos, and that person was so on top of it. Like it literally just flowed seamlessly. And it really helped make a memorable illustration happen. We were using Nolan Ryan, these pictures of him throughout his career to show his growth and his maturity as an athlete. And we were talking about how God works in our lives. And your people back there were so prepared. And they were so on top of it. They had to do it all day long, and they nailed it, which that moment would not have been as memorable or powerful had they missed it by a fraction, right? And we've all seen that happen.
100%.
Okay, so that brings me to the weekend. This is Beyond the Weekend. We're doing Fruit of the Spirit.
Yep.
And we talked about faithfulness this week, which we said faithfulness is like a track record, So, Adam, let's get into your spiritual life. We've talked about your professional life and what your ministry here at Three Circle and all that weight that you carry. But you're also what I love about you, brother, is you are a serious believer, and you really walking with Jesus. You want to get it right at home. You want to get it right with your marriage. You want to get it right as a dad. You're a great dad. Talk to us about, as we talked about faithfulness and building that undeniable truth that we are who we say we are in Christ. How do you do that, man? How are you trying to build consistency and as a dad so that your kids can see it, so that you're leading your home? What's that looking like for you?
I wish I could say I was 100% consistent, but we're people.
None of us are.
I try to read a proverb a day. Just when I was younger, my youth pastor was like, "There's 31 proverbs for a reason." 31 days in the month.
I had who was your youth pastor? That
Chad Stafford.
Okay,
yeah.
Chad's a good friend and a local pastor at Coastal Church.
Coastal Church,
wonderful guy. Yeah, man, that's good advice. I did the same thing.
Yeah.
A chapter for every day.
Right, like kind of builds that steadiness, that consistency where like it kind of becomes a habit.
Yes. Do you still do that?
Yeah, I do it as much as I can. Like there are obviously days where I'm like, oh dang, I forgot,
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought about it this morning. I was like, reading a Proverbs kind of like a fortune cookie, It's like every single one of those chapters has a bunch of fortune cookies. They're just a lot cheaper than going to Hibachi to get one.
And they also happen to be eternal truth.
Absolutely.
Which is just a tad
absolutely.
different.
Yeah, the fortune is, hey, this is what you can do. Or,
Right.
But yeah, reading a proverb a day. I love the Pauline epistles.
Yeah.
Like I don't know who doesn't, but
what is it that jumps out at you?
I mean, just his faithfulness, his steadfastness, and the fact that he is just a cut and dry dude that will tell you how he feels, call you out.
Yeah, you feel that, don't you?
Yeah.
In those epistles.
Absolutely. And then also he's very comforting too at the same time. Yeah. Like he, depending on who he's writing to and like 2 Timothy.
He was so smart, you would think Paul probably could have easily been a really hard guy to be around, right?
Yeah.
If he wasn't careful. He's the smartest guy in every room he walks into.
You're right.
He's got all the background to be proud and arrogant, which I'm sure he battled.
Probably was.
I'm sure he battled.
At first, yeah.
But you're right. He developed a deep empathy for other believers in churches. You can see it coming across, right? That he loved them. He loved them so much.
So, try to I do that. Proverbs, love Pauline epistles, read those. I'm going through my daughter a couple months ago. I was like, hey, can we just start at Genesis and just go through the whole Bible? I'm like, absolutely.
Wow.
And
that's awesome.
Thinking, I'm almost 40 years old.
How old is she?
She's 12.
Oh, yeah. You're gonna have some real fun spots as you roll through the Old Testament.
100%. So we start reading. I'm like, oh, we can do this amount today, and I quickly realized that is not the case.
Yeah.
But my boys have. My grandmother gave them a few years ago this picture Bible.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an adventure Bible thing. It looks like Marvel characters and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they love reading stories out of that. But all of those connections and stuff, kind of help with the consistency and kind of showing a faithfulness or steadfastness to your kids.
Right. They begin to see a consistency.
Right.
Which was the word that kind of kept floating to the top, if you will, this past weekend with the component of the fruit of the Spirit of faithfulness, is that we have to be consistent. You know, and Jesus was consistent. He modeled it for us. But the truth is, the reason we know that's supernatural, right, Adam, is that we naturally are inconsistent.
Right.
The most natural thing for us is to be different people at different times. Circumstances can change our entire mood. And yet God matures us to where there becomes this flatter line, if you will, right? Not ups and downs.
And when you're not being consistent, you can feel the ups and downs way more.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So what would you say, let's get honest for a second here, because you've got all the pressures that we all have. Your kids are younger, so you got all that unique pressure. And, and you've got, like I do, your kids are all very unique and different. You've got athletes and ones that, don't care about that so much. And it just coming from all different directions. You're trying to hold all that together with your wife. When do you become vulnerable to those inconsistencies for your flesh to kind of rear its ugly head in your life?
Baseball season.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that? Because of the demands?
It's busy. You're busy at work. You're busy, busy in the
Yes.
spring, that kind of stuff. And it's just, you kind of start making the excuses of, I don't have enough time. And obviously it's a terrible excuse. Everybody has the same amount of time.
It's true.
It's 24 hours in a day. You can stay up an extra hour.
Yeah.
Wake up an extra hour early.
Yeah. Get off the phone.
Get off the phone. Get off the TV.
Do you ever look at your, the
Screen
thing
time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How convicting is that every time you look at it?
Very convicting. Because also in the technology side of things, I love technology.
I do too.
So I'm always, looking at.
And I'm curious, so I'm always reading stuff. So, but then I'll justify and I'll go, well, that's just because I'm researching or reading. And so what I'm trying to do to get a more accurate look at it, Adam, honestly, is I'm trying to not read. I'm not downloading digital books onto my phone anymore so that I can actually get an accurate look at how much I'm actually doing. Because I think in my mind I'm justifying screen time by going, well, that's a lot of book reading I'm doing, which is true. So I don't have an accurate look at it. And I'm convinced I'm spending too much time just, messing around and looking at, the sports or following those crazy rabbit trails that we all do since all eternal knowledge is in our hand now. Right.
Yep. Sending Instagram memes to people, all that stuff.
Oh, Lord. Yeah. Yes, it can eat up our time.
Absolutely.
So faithfulness is supernatural. For us to begin to develop that consistency, it's something God's doing inside of us.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
And it's something that Peter told us, that last verse we looked at Sunday was, make every effort. So do you find it hard to kind of pull together what Jesus said, you can't do it without me, you must abide in me, and here's Peter saying, you make every effort to add to your faith virtue, to see all this happen. Why do you think, because of course we don't believe the Bible contradicts itself ever, so then how do we reconcile those two?
I think in any relationship that there's always a reciprocation. So like with our relationship with God is if we're not making every effort to be close to God, He's still making that effort, but we're not seeing it. So we're turning our back on Him. So, and it's just being, content in the fact that that if you make every effort to follow God, He's always going to be there. So I don't think those two things contradict at all as far as, you just said that obviously, but God's always there.
So you're saying they don't even feel as contradictory to you?
No, not at all.
Because initially I look at the two and I'm like, man, because a lot of people will look at the Pauline teachings, which you brought up, of all faith, all grace.
Right.
And then you roll over to James, and James is like, if your faith is dead if it's not accompanied by good works.
Right.
And you can, on the surface, you can go, oh, that feels contradictory, but of course it's not. And I don't know what the equation is between how much of it's God. I think God even empowers our effort as Christians, so to speak. But I think what Peter's saying is stop trying to figure that out and just run after this. Give it everything you've got, because God's going to fuel that as well. Give it all your effort. This is not just sit back in the chair and hope that God will develop the fruit in us, right?
And I think that's funny you bring up James, because it kind of popped up on my daily refresh today. But it says, be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves, because if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like someone looking at his own face in a mirror.
Oh, man.
And so, like, to me, that's the more you hear the word, the more you dive into the scriptures and read, the more you want to do.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you just sit and read and kind of take your faith and keep it for yourself, what is that doing for you?
Right.
It's not doing anything.
Yeah.
And so, like,
deceive yourselves. That's strong language.
It is.
But we do, don't we?
Absolutely.
We read a verse and we kind of we think, okay, I read that.
Yeah.
No, he's like,
kind of pick and choose what you want to hear.
Go live it now. Go do it.
Right.
Okay, so Adam, we've hit a lot of interesting things about your life, but again, let me just kind of circle back around. So you're an opera singer.
You used to be.
Okay, so if right now I were to say, bro, just turn it loose one time, just give it to us. I know you won't. I mean, you've made that clear that you will never, ever, ever, and I get that. And I'll just remind you, the Bible says, if you've got a light, don't put it under a bushel. And when I was a kid, we would sing it, hide it under a bushel. No, I'm going to let it shine.
So one would say that you asked me to be on the Faithful podcast today because I haven't been faithful with my calling in my opera singing.
Maybe so. Maybe that's why we chose it, and I'm trying to apply the pressure. Okay, so what's the difference in what I just did, that little, I'm going to let it shine? What would be different if I were to do that in what I would call an opera way?
It's technique.
Technique.
More affected a little bit.
Yeah.
A lot of people kind of, I don't really know how the old, all the technical terms for stuff anymore, but like it's more from the diaphragm.
From the gut.
From the gut, yeah.
Can you break glass with your voice?
No, absolutely not.
I bet you can.
No, I cannot.
Stop being humble.
I can break some eardrums, that's for sure.
Okay, and the last thing, and I think everyone needs to know this. You created, as a father, you are a dad, and you created a bit of a national sensation a few years ago. A lot of people don't realize this, but you're famous. All the way to all the talk shows. Who all got you? Jimmy Fallon.
Jimmy Fallon he mentioned
He's the main one.
Yeah.
He mentioned it. Once again, the false humility. Come on now.
Yeah, right.
It was a big deal.
It was cool.
And it all came down to the fact that one of your kids crawled into a claw machine.
Yep, my youngest.
A claw. Yeah, so tell us the story because it's awesome.
So we were with our small group at Rotolo's in Fairhope, and my wife had she was watching the kids. I was talking to some of the other guys.
So now we're going to blame it on your wife.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, we're getting there. So I told her, I was like, hey, you go hang out and you start talking to all the other women that are in our small group, and I got the kids.
Yeah.
Of course, it's all in that arcade back there.
Uh-huh.
So they're all in that one little spot. So as a dad, of course, you're like, they're good. So I literally turned my back for 5 seconds, and then my oldest son comes up to me. He's like, hey, Ezra's in that machine. And I was like, no, he's. I'm thinking like the arcade where you go and like race cars and stuff.
In your mind, you're like, he's not in a machine, right?
He's playing on one, but he's inside the spot he's supposed to be. Well, I look over and he is like inside the drop point for one of these claw machines.
Oh my goodness!
And of course, then that sends everybody through a tailspin. But
did Ezra freak out?
No.
How old was he?
He had just turned 2.
And he acted like he'd been in a claw machine his whole life.
He loved it. He loved it.
Okay, so you guys get before it's over, fire department's there. Isn't that right?
There. Yeah, fire department, police department. I mean, they kind of went overboard.
Yeah, of course. Well, Fairhope, Alabama, they're like, hey, we got something. We got something going on. Okay, so they all show up. How do they get Ezra out of the claw machine?
They tried to crowbar him out, but it's glass, so that wouldn't have been a smart move.
Yeah.
But they ended up unscrewing the top, and they sent a guy in, climbed in, and then pulled him out.
So it was a rescue mission.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that somehow gets out. How did Fallon talk about it?
So it got out because the entire police and fire department were at Rotolo's. It got out on Facebook what's happening in Fairhope, and so I think Fox 10 contacted my wife and was like, "Hey, we want to interview you. Your kid got stuck. We want to see how it happened, kind of thing.
We want to hear why you guys are terrible parents."
Yeah, exactly,
all that.
exactly.
Right.
And we got those comments too. It's funny, like,
sure.
Nobody watches their kids these days.
There you go.
And so it hits our local news just online, and then Jimmy Fallon, and probably a week later, was like, "Oh, by the way," in his opening segment, by the way, like this kid in Alabama got stuck in a claw machine and kind of moved on.
Yeah, but who among us can say that we've been featured on Fallon?
Well, then a year later, maybe 2 years later, we got an email from Ridiculousness on MTV.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so they wanted to use that segment on their show,
and they did.
And they did.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
I wish we could say we got rich off of it, but we did not.
No residuals or anything.
$200.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I love that story. Well, Adam, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast today, and what you bring to the table, man. I love that you bring a whole world of excellence and that a lot of people don't see, and hopefully, maybe we've uncovered that a little bit today for you and your team. But we love that you bring so much excellence to the table at Three Circle. And if you were to leave the listeners, today with one thing that hopefully will stir them and point them towards Christ, Jesus said to see the fruit abide in me. How would you encourage them today? How do you abide in Christ and find that intimacy with Him?
Just spending time with Him. Like I said earlier, like the times when I'm not faithful, not consistent, and wake up in the morning or even before I go to bed and say a quick prayer or read a few chapters in my Bible, like the next day you really feel it. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing about people is that even though you feel that you weren't consistent enough, it somehow drives you to stay inconsistent. And so
absolutely.
It's like being cognizant enough in your own self to just wake up and go, I need to read my Bible today to stay close to God. Mm-hmm. And
it's funny, everyone goes to the Word real fast when we ask that question. How do you abide in Christ? I think we all understand the Word of God is not just words on paper.
Nope.
Of course, we know that theologically, but sometimes we need to practically live that book is a living document. This book reads us, right? It reads us as much as we read it.
Yeah, and it reminds us to stay humble and reminds us to have to trust in God to make it through.
Yeah.
Because if we're doing it on our own, it's just not going to happen.
100%, man. Well, Adam, thanks for being on the podcast today, and we hope that you will join us again next week, same place, same time. We'll be going beyond the weekend, and we hope that you'll continue to build a track record in your own life, as we're all seeking to do. Make every effort, like 1 Peter said, and we hope that you'll continue to join us right here at the Three Circle Podcast beyond the weekend. We'll see you next time.